was a young Paul Chambers thinking when he created this bass line on a great tune called Milestones from Miles Davis? Let's talk about it today. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm Matt, and I've been playing bass professionally for over 30 years with folks like Wynton Marsalis, and I teach at the Juilliard School and also University of North Carolina School for the Arts. I'm glad that you're here. As I said, Paul Chambers was a lot younger when he recorded this than I am now at 52 years old. And trying to get inside the head of somebody from, the performance from 70 years ago is definitely tricky. But when we analyze bass lines, it can help a lot. Look for a link below for a PDF of this transcription and a little bit about the harmony that we'll discuss as well. First, let's talk about the tune itself. It's called Milestones. This is the new version of Milestones. There is an old bebop Milestones that was written in the 40s. I can't exactly remember when, but it has a different melody and chords altogether. They're very different tunes. This is essentially what is the precursor or is the beginnings of, or however you want to say, it is essentially a modal tune. When we say modal tune, that refers to generally, broadly speaking, a harmonic approach in a composition where there's not a lot of chords. That's essentially the simple answer. There's more, but labels are labels and so on and so forth. Anyway, so the point is there are not a lot of chords in this tune. There's also a little bit of an odd form to this song. The form sections are A, B, A, but the B section or the bridge is actually 16 measures long instead of 8, which it normally is. So this is a 40 bar song. And with the fact that the chords don't change very often, it requires a lot of concentration to keep your place, which is helpful to work on for keeping our place. The harmony itself in the A sections is generally written out as a G minor 7 chord that kind of resolves to F major. Sometimes it's written as a C7 or a C7 sus. And that leads to sort of the mystery of this performance from Paul Chambers. The fact that these two sounds are so close to each other, the C7 sus and the G minor 7 sus, leads to this sort of mercurial quality to what the harmony is supposed to be here, as far as from whatever the composer intended. Taking a look at what Paul actually played kind of gives some insight, but is also a bit confusing. Let's talk first real quickly about how these chords are constructed. The G minor 7 chord would have a G as the root, B flat is the flat third, D natural is the fifth, and F is the flat 7. Now a C7 sus only has one note that's different, and that is the C. So instead of a D, it's got a C, but you start on C. So C is the root, C, and then F is the fourth. That's a suspended fourth. G is the fifth, B flat, C again. Notice again, the same notes are B flat, F, and G in both chords. Part of the reason for that is that they are extracted from the same color sort of family of the home sound that they're drawn from, which is F major. So all those notes are in F major. These chords occur naturally or can occur naturally in the F major scale. So again, there's this little mystery. What is the intention and what is Paul intending? He complicates the matter by changing many times what I think he might be intending. Before we get there, let's talk about the bridge really quick. This bridge has an A minor 9 chord. That would be spelled A, C natural is the flat third, E natural is the fifth, G natural is flat 7, A again, and then the 9 would be the second degree of the scale, a naturally occurring second degree of A major, and that's B natural, not B flat. And the way that folks improvise on this, on the recording, helps us to understand that this is actually coming from the Aeolian sound. That means that The A Aeolian is the sixth mode or the sixth degree of C major. So the essential sound, core sound that it's pulled from there is C major on the bridge. On top of the fact that it changes the harmonic foundation and it's 16 bars, they play it with this repeating ostinato that Paul Chambers plays. And that is a really helpful thing to learn. And in fact, may kind of be considered an essential bass line in that series that I do of essential lines, like little things we all should know that bass players do. What Paul is doing here is kind of essential, at least to know. And let's talk about that real quick for a second, because that's a singular moment. What he's doing is playing the E on the G string. And then when you use your fourth finger to play the E, the A natural is right under your first finger on the D string. A natural, that's the root of the chord. And then of course we have the open A available. And so rhythmically, it's a little bit tricky. He starts every time on beat 2, and he's essentially sort of sweeping those notes down, or sometimes we call raking the strings. So it's quickly E to A to open, E to A to open A, and then back up to E. Sometimes he's not quite pressing the A all the way down, so you can't quite hear a pitch. Sometimes I wonder whether he's even playing that at all, but for sure it happens sometimes just incidentally. Like his finger is on the D string and he's raking down. Remember, raking is sort of dragging your fingers across the strings in one motion, like this. So you are naturally hitting the D string. And if your hand is slightly down, you're going to get a percussive quality, a percussive sound to it. So, and it is almost like incidental because you're trying to get to the lower A. E, E, low A, E. So, understanding sort of how to do that or messing around with that, trying to get that sort of movement into your hands is really helpful. And because it's a sort of technique we use all the time. So, keeping your place and knowing where you are during that section is particularly difficult because he repeats this ostinato over and over and over again. It does change a little bit as the tune goes on, which you should check out. So let's talk about what he's doing in the walking section, where we have these sort of mysterious chords and mysterious, quote unquote, mysterious harmony. First of all, I generally do think that he is thinking what the intended harmony is that we talked about, meaning it's some kind of G minor 7 or C7. Remember, C7, a C7 sound, even a C sus sound, especially when you hint at the third instead of the fourth. So when you hint at E natural instead of C, F, G, B flat, if you say C, E, G, B flat, that's a C7 chord. That is the 5 chord in F major, and really wants to pull to F major, really wants to return there, really wants to move. Because of that, and certainly he had the knowledge of that sound 100%. So there is this leaning towards C7 or possibly a C7 sound often. If we look sort of bar by bar for a few bars, if we start at bar 1, it seems like he's playing G minor right away. He starts with G on the downbeat, G, D, A, B flat, and then C is the next downbeat, C, D, E natural, F. Very possibly could be thinking C major or C sus. And that idea kind of repeats for the next two measures. But in bar 5, look what he plays. C, D, E, F, G. That sounds way more like he's thinking C7 for those two bars, even if it is like C sus. If we jump to the next A section, measure 33, it seems like possibly he's thinking G minor for 2 bars here instead of 1. He plays D, B flat, G, and then there's some kind of note here. It's extraordinarily hard to hear. I put it in parentheses, possibly a G harmonic here, but then D, G, F, and then D sharp to E. That sounds like a new chord, like a change in chord. And I think he's probably thinking C7 there. So 2 bars of G minor, 2 bars of C minor, instead of 1 bar of G minor, 1 bar of C7, or 2 bars of C7. So already within the first 3 A's, he's changed sort of the harmonic rhythm or the harmonic intention. Look at the next 4 bars of this. So measure 37. I believe that the first 2 bars are probably, thinking G minor 7, because he plays B flat, A, G, F, E, F, G. And ironically, the next bar is that he plays a C on the downbeat of the F major. So he's starting with the 5th and then getting there eventually a whole bar later. C, D, D sharp, E, F, like a walk up to F, like a blues, kind of the standard sort of movement from a 5 chord to a 1 chord that we do, this walk up. So, but the chord there is supposed to be F major. So is he purposefully delaying it? Very, very likely. Is he just essentially understanding that that broad sound is what's happening, and it doesn't really matter if he plays the root or any other chord tone or 2 chord tones in that bar instead of the root at all? I'm not really sure. And that goes to the broader point about the whole of kind of what I'm getting to and what I think ultimately his approach was, which is there is this general sound of tension, a suspended tension, or not technically a suspended chord per se, but you can think of that. But you're thinking of multiple things at once. I've used this reference before to thinking of an amalgam or what's that? Psychological, a gestalt, where you're taking sort of the snapshot of everything at once. And I think that's where he's hearing it. There's all this suspension from F major that eventually resolves to F major quickly. And that suspension sound is in the family of C dominant, which includes G minor 7, which also includes C7 sus. I think the reason we read it as C7 sus, which I did in parentheses here, is because the C7 sus captures the G minor 7 really well, that sound in it really well, because of the F natural. And C7 sus is often really associated very closely with quickly resolving to C dominant and can function as a dominant chord. So it all sort of lays under C7, the C7 umbrella, all these sounds. And knowing it's a fast tempo, the chords don't really change, and we generally have this feeling of resolving to F major from some suspended place that is basically diatonic. And I think that's his approach. And he is essentially either not thinking about what his chord intention is at all, except when it's supposed to resolve or when the form is supposed to change to A minor. So he's not thinking about it at all, or he's just thinking in the moment to work with patterns or sounds that he's used before. And it's fine that the intention behind his bass line changes. It's entirely fine and makes sense because the overall structure of the color does not change in the A section in total, and especially in those first 6 bars. So what does this teach us about what we can do on modal tunes? A common question that I've addressed in other videos is, and will link to if I remember, is ways that we can navigate chords that don't change. And this is certainly one big concept that you can think about. If you understand the underlying harmony behind the written chord or behind what is being played by the chordal instruments, you can fit in other intended chords that are married with or sound right with the chord that is played. You can play chords that don't fit as well. That's a separate sort of level. But one easy thought is if you've got D minor 7 for a bunch of bars like So What or Impressions, you can imply other chords that go in the D minor sound, in a D Dorian sound. That could be E minor, that could be G7, that could be many chords from C major, just in your head and in your intention in your line, and it doesn't disturb the intended harmony of what the composer meant. So just adding that thought of thinking for yourself only, I am just going to try to imply some different harmony that works here, will give your lines internal structure and interest and so on. I hope this was helpful for you today to talk about and gave you some ideas. Look for that link below for a PDF. And if you want to have another chance to look deeper into bass lines like this and in this way, my course Jazz Bass 101, Walking Essential Tunes, is available at a link below. And I'm going to have a new course that is coming out in September with the basics, the basics of walking bass. And I hope that you'll join me for that. But thanks for joining me today, and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.